history is replete with strong, generous, and powerful kings and monarchs who have been brought down by the power of the people. And Mr. Speaker, today I want to remind them of a man called Belshazzar, a man who God favored to be king in the book of Daniel. Instead of being grateful that God has honored you among so many millions of citizens to be their leader, he entertained a government that was so divisive, so oppressive. And he did a big party and called all the important men whose fathers and mothers were important people at that time. And the Bible says he made a feast. And he entertained them in that feast, and even went on to commit sacrilege by using the utensils that had been taken from the temple to commit and drink the drink of fornication using the vessels taken from the temple. Mr. Speaker, as they were enjoying, as they were making merry, as the deep state was celebrating, as the system was celebrating, suddenly, and I say suddenly, there is going to be a war in this country. There is going to be a writing on the wall. Many, Tekel and Parisi.
That was you in August 2020, and there are many circumstances that you described there.
Correct.
Maybe not exactly the same as it is now, but when you reflect on that versus a situation where people had felt not being heard or not being listened, the questions of opulence, extravagance by some of the state officers, what comes to mind now?
Two differences between my speech in 2020 and what happened in June 25th. Mm-hmm. The first difference, of course, is that towards the end of that clip, I said that there's going to be a war. Not war, W-A-R. War, W-A-R-R. Because I was talking about the writing on the wall. That's the first difference. Mm-hmm. But two, Nebuchadnezzar was king of Babylon. Babylon did not have a constitution. Those are the two differences. Reflecting back on what happened 2 weeks ago, mm-hmm. or last week, it is the right of the people of Kenya to tell their government what they think about that government. That is the basis of democracy. Displeasure, disapproval, disaffection, all those things are democratic. They are constitutional because of Article 4 of the Constitution that says Kenya shall be a multi-party democratic state. And then the article goes on to define the coordinates that make the territory of Kenya. So citizens expressing different views and telling government that, for example, the war against corruption is not strong enough. Citizens telling their government that they think government officials are living large. It's within their right, and it's within the tenets of democracy.
Are they right?
I didn't say they are right. I said it's within their right. Mm. Because asking me whether they are right is you're asking the wrong question, or rather you're asking the wrong person the right question, because they are telling us, including me. So we are listening, and very seriously so. And as you've seen from the president's interview on Sunday and subsequent communications, mm-hmm. the government is committed not only to listen to what the people of Kenya are saying, but to implement every viable solution that can make our country better. And I want to support the position that time has come for our country to define its future and to relook at ourselves. And government, of course, being the duly elected agency to steer the affairs of the state, we have the responsibility to make sure that what the people are saying in terms of adjusting the way we relate to the people, the way we express ourselves, the way we do things, we must not only listen, but we must also adjust and correct ourselves.
Okay.
And therefore, just before you go to the next question, my problem as the country's security minister with the events of last week and subsequently, it's not the expression of disapproval or disaffection or disagreement or divergence. My problem as the country's security minister is violation of the constitution by people who are making a case for the implementation and enforcement of the same constitution, committing crimes, breaching peace, and all the other things, arson and looting people's property. So anybody in that space is an enemy of Kenya. I want even to use a stronger word than anarchist. It's an enemy of the country. And anybody else below that, anybody who is expressing themselves, who is saying this government needs to address corruption and opulence, is on the right side of the constitution and must be affirmed.
And we have heard you say, or rather, we have read you saying that this will be contained at whatever cost. Maybe you can help us understand what that exactly means. But also, the president at some point spoke about financiers and planners, stroke plotters of what has been going on. Who are these people?
What happened on 25th of August
You mean of
was
June?
an attempt of June, sorry.
Yep.
Was an attempt to overthrow the constitutional order of our country. We have made progress in terms of tracking those who are responsible for hurting our national security. I want to affirm the words that you've said, you've quoted me. I want to reaffirm them, that the government will stop at nothing until we deal with dangerous people who planned, financed, and enabled criminals, not only to hijack a peaceful process, but also to hurt the country and spread fear and terror on the public of this country. I want to assure the people of Kenya there will be full accountability. I also want to clarify, because in the past, we have had nearly similar incidents. For example, we had a serious breach of order at the National Tallying Center during the presidential election in 15th of August 2022. The impunity of not punishing the planners and orchestrators of those dangerous crimes is what has bred repeat behavior. For example, after the bombers process, we continued with business as usual. And therefore, this time round, I want to promise the people of Kenya, we will do it. Number two.
Are these people known, the planners?
Number two, I have said investigations are ongoing. We have a rough idea who they are.
Don't tell me the name, but are you able to describe?
Of course, I can't tell you.
I don't want the names.
There are two groups. Some are known merchants of crime. Their work is to facilitate criminal gangs. They've been on our radar. This time round, we have immutable evidence linking them to mobilizing criminal gangs. The second group is a group of opportunistic political operatives. And luckily for us as a country this time round, unlike in the past, when the opportunistic political operatives have been partisan, this time round, both at the national and local level, where there was a grave breach of law and order, we are tracking and we have evidence leading to political operatives from across the political divide, which is a beautiful thing for the country. Because when it is eventually, when we are able to prosecute people across the political divide, this idea that the criminal justice system and the law enforcement system is for settling political scores will disappear.
When you say across the divide, are you saying people in government as well as people outside government?
No, those are your words, Sam. What I mean, you should have asked me, what do you mean?
No.
You know, now you're saying,
Maybe
do you
the
mean?
questions
No.
we'll answer.
I know that, but you know, my work also is to answer questions in the way in which I deem appropriate. That's why I came. I came to answer your questions, not in your way, but in my way. Now, when I say across the political divide, I mean these are political operatives who are associated or who claim to be supporters of either the government political formation or the opposition political formation. That's what I meant. I didn't say they're in government. I just said they claim to be associated or supporters of either the government or the opposition.
So if these are people that support, some of them associate themselves as supporters of the government, why would they be doing this to destabilize the government?
That is the question. That is the question, Sam.
So they're associated with the government?
They claim to be associated. They claim to be associated.
What does that mean, claim?
That's what they say. They
You're
say,
telling me.
Yes, they say we are associated with the government. Yeah, that's what they claim. So what we've done as the law enforcement and national security organs of the state is to make sure that we blind ourselves to any allegiance of a political, religious, ethnic, or other nature, and make sure that we pursue criminals for who they are and prosecute them as a way of ending the impunity that this country has witnessed.
Let's understand that more deeply, because you're saying that there are criminal gangs that have hijacked the demonstrations. And you're saying that some of them could be people claiming to be associated with the government.
Yeah.
What role did they play?
Planning, financing, mobilizing, inciting, etc.
So that what happens?
Let me give you an example.
Yep.
Although, as you're aware, discussions like this should not prejudice investigations. Sure. It is against the tenets of due process. We have a cell of dangerous criminals who have, many instances, even before this protest began, have been terrorizing people between Emali, Makindu, Kibwezi. They blocked the highway. Even when there was a protest by the opposition, they caused the same mayhem. They blocked the Mombasa-Nairobi highway from time to time. Even today, there was a small skirmish around there. There was looting in one of the establishments there. So that cell of criminals has two sides. The evidence we have at the moment, although it's preliminary, is leading us to divergent groups. One of the groups is patronized or superintended by low-level political activists associated with the opposition. But there is also another gang, a rival gang, where evidence is pointing us to the patronage of local operatives along that stretch who claim to be supporters of the Kenya Kwanza administration. And therefore, the investigators are going to be very fair and will treat the evidence that we have, or the evidence that we'll get, with all the impartiality. And I am convinced beyond doubt, based on the progress that is happening, we're going to prosecute organizers, planners, financiers, and inciters of the violence on that stretch from both sides of the political divide. And there are many other examples in Nairobi and other parts of the country.
You call them low-level political activists associated with the Kenya Kwanza or the supporters of Kenya Kwanza administration. I'm just wondering if there's any patronage from senior politicians within.
We are not ruling out anything, so that could be a possibility.
Senior to what extent?
We don't know, but we'll go as far as the evidence.
You have an idea.
Why do you think so?
Because I think you're quite informed.
Yeah, but the investigations are not complete, some.
Okay, I'll look for you.
We'll reach there.
Now, let's talk about the deployment of Kenya Defence Forces, because on 25th of June, that is last Tuesday in the evening, we saw the Cabinet Secretary for Defence saying there's a security emergency, and therefore KDF would be asked to support the National Police Service in containing the situation. First, what is security emergency?
The security emergency is not defined in the Constitution. So you can look up at your dictionary. An emergency is a security emergency is a threat, a security threat that emerges and poses significant strain on law enforcement that requires reinforcement and perhaps special operations. That is my description. But as I have said, it is not described in the Constitution. But as a scholar of constitutional law, I have an idea what a security emergency would constitute. It must be unplanned situation, which is a threat to the security of the country, which requires special operations, special planning, and possibly reinforcement of the existing deployments.
So who decided there's a security emergency?
Who decided?
There's a security emergency.
The decision on what constitutes a security emergency is a decision that is to be made by the organs of national security established in Article 239, 240 of the Constitution. And therefore, the preservation of internal security falls within the National Police Service, of course supported by the National Intelligence Service. The protection of our defense, the defense of our borders, is actualized through the Kenya Defence Forces, which of course has military intelligence component.
Right.
So when a threat like what we consider to be an emergency last week happens, the Cabinet Secretary for Interior, after consulting, of course, the service commanders, makes a request to the Cabinet Secretary for Defense in the case where we would request the application of Article 241 3B or 3C. So in this case, the procedure there was followed, and after the request is made, The Minister of Defense, of course, uses the internal mechanisms within the Kenya Defense Forces and consultations. And of course, once a decision is made, the Inspector General of the National Police Service and the Chief of Defense Forces meet, and in this case, they met to plan what we call an operational order, how the support requested to reinforce the National Police Service in this emergency will be conducted. And the rest, of course, is the work once the Minister of Defense gazettes the reinforcement of the support. The operational issues are agreed between the Inspector General of Police and the Chief of Defense Forces.
So as the man in charge of internal security, you are convinced it was a security emergency?
Beyond any doubt.
And then the Cabinet Secretary for Defense described or used a word that is not defined in the Constitution, but used a constitutional provision to deploy the KDF.
My brother was here yesterday, so I don't want to speak for him. What I know, collectively, I can tell the country without any fear of contradiction that all the procedures of the interface between the organs of internal security and our Kenya Defense Forces were followed, and whatever gaps existed, the courts, and I say this with pride, assisted us to regularize that gap. And we had no problem once the court said, fine, this is an okay decision, but do ABCD. We complied within 24 hours.
You see, let's talk about the process, because the Cabinet Secretary for Defense, Aden Duale, used 241(3)(c) that talks about the Defense Forces shall assist and cooperate with other authorities in situations of emergency or disaster and report to the National Assembly whenever deployed in such circumstances. But then the following day, very early in the morning, the National Assembly was called, but it was debating a motion that has 241(3)(c) that talks about the Kenya Defense Forces, the Defense Forces may be deployed to restore peace in any part of Kenya affected by unrest or instability only with the approval of the National Assembly. What was that confusion about? Because the Cabinet Secretary is using a different clause. The National Assembly is debating a motion that includes an extra clause.
You know, that is just legal semantics, which, in other words, when you have an interface between KDF and NPS, it's either paragraph B or C. And depending on the situation, paragraph B would apply, and depending on other situations, C would apply. So if, for example, there was a change of clause, I'm sure it was based on perhaps legal advice. Because as we said, even after the decision was made, when the matter was adjudicated by court, the courts assisted us, because the work of the judiciary is to help us interpret the law.
Right.
And said, this is the gap which is there. And then we rectified it. So as to whether it was under paragraph B or C, those are interpretative issues, and any corrections or adjustments most certainly would have been occasioned by legal advice.
Had you seen the Gazette notice before it was published?
Yes.
Or the draft?
Yes, but I had seen it, but the Gazette notice was the Gazette notice of my brother, the CS for Defense. It was not my Gazette notice.
No, I'm asking that because you said you're a constitutional lawyer, and indeed you are, so probably those are issues that you're also reflecting on.
Are you doubting?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I just said indeed you are. There's nothing to doubt, Waziri.
So I had seen it, but not as a constitutional lawyer. I'd seen it as the Minister for Interior.
Okay. All right. So, so what are they supposed to be doing, the KDF officers?
Why should I be speaking for KDF? The minister was here. Okay. They're supposed to
let me change the question.
Support us.
Let me change the question. So, when do police officers engage, and when do they allow the Kenya Defense Forces to take over?
That is now subject to the operational order, which as I've said, those are operational issues. And for us ministers, we deal with policy issues. That operational order is the order agreed upon by the IG and the KD and the Chief of Defense Forces.
You're not aware?
And it's not my business because I don't deal with operations and tactics. I deal with policy.
So you're not aware?
I'm aware, but why should it be?
Because Kenyans would want to understand.
Operational issues?
When they're walking on the streets, look, was it?
If a police officer is enforcing the law, the only guidance that they receive from us and from government is to make sure they comply with the Constitution. The rest, these are trained professionals. That's what they do. They are professionals.
How do you ensure
know
they comply if you don't want to
we
talk
give them
about what exactly they're supposed to be doing on the streets?
We give them constitutional guidelines, legal guidelines, so that they don't go outside the law. In between, tactical issues and maneuvers and the methods, so long as they are constitutional, that's what they spend 1 year training for. And it's not the work of ministers to deal with that at all.
Okay.
And in case of any variance, there's enough oversight mechanisms of addressing that.
All right. We'll be taking feedback shortly. But as we do so how does the government regain confidence of the people moving forward? Because the past few weeks and actually months have been quite something if you have to look at the reactions of Kenyans on different platforms, but also even on the streets. How do you walk that journey?
By listening more, engaging more, and acting more. That way, I believe government will improve on its current rating. And I don't think it has an option.
Now, Waziri, lately, I'm waiting for the questions, but as we wait for that, lately there has been a bit of conflict within the government that you also part of, the administration that you're part of. And I've seen you speaking quite authoritatively about people that are keen on taking back the country to the times of tribalism. What is going on? Because you've had the president speaking from a different direction and the deputy president speaking from another, to an extent that even there appears to be some conflict within the National Security Council when the deputy president comes and attacks or speaks about the National Intelligence Service Director General. What's going on?
What is going on, I think, is just expression of views, which is okay in a democratic state. However, the reason that I, for example, have occasionally made public comments about certain things is because of the role that I am currently playing as the country's interior minister. Because if you look at Executive Order number 1 of 2022 and subsequently number 2 of 2023, the mandate of national cohesion and national unity is part of our ministry's job to make sure Kenya is united.
Right.
So when we hear sentiments that could divide the people of Kenya and bring division along ethnic lines, we have to make sure we defend that position. And also, just to clarify government policy, because as you know, ministers ministers are supposed to be neutral, except in defense of government policy. I want to confirm it is government policy to preserve the unity of Kenya and to ensure an integrated nation, cohesive, and to address any form of divisions that could split apart our country. So that is the context. But in terms of the comments, maybe about by the president or the deputy president, that is above my pay grade. I cannot really comment on the statements by the president or his deputy. And maybe there are ways in which you can find that information from them. And also, the deputy president is the deputy of the president. It's not my deputy. If you are talking about my deputy, then you tell me, can you tell us about you and your deputy? So on that note, I would not want to venture in that space. I'm very clear in my mind that national unity, national cohesion, and the inclusivity of the people of Kenya is not only a constitutional imperative under Article 10 of the Constitution, but it's also the policy of the Kenya Kwanza administration, which I'm part of.
And speaking about that, because for sure, cohesion of the country is within your mandate, but are you concerned that you may be protecting the cohesion of the country, but cohesion of the administration is at risk?
First, let me say that government has to be cohesive so that it can be delivered. For sure, that is a fact. And I and many other people who are part of this government are working very hard to make sure that we support the president to not only unify the country, but also unify his administration so that we can deliver to the people of Kenya. But there's a difference between the unity of the nation and the unity of government. And between the two, the nation's unity is a superior aspiration, because an administration is just an administration.
Is it possible to have one in exclusion of the other?
Ideally, you would rather have both. But when you, in terms of priority, nation first, then government and the rest of us and so forth. And so that is the order of things. And because I have cited Executive Order number 1, which is spelling out delegated responsibilities. If you look at it, it talks about national cohesion and integration. I have no mandate to unify the government of Kenya Kwanza.
Okay.
But I have a mandate under that document to defend, protect, and promote the unity of Kenya.
You've said something interesting.
But of course, I would, as a responsible member of the Kenya Kwanza administration, and in the spirit of collective responsibility, I and many other colleagues are working so hard to ensure that we continue reading from the same script, working together, and promoting unity of purpose.
Okay.
Because it is the right thing to do, and it is in the public interest, and it's in accordance with the Public Officer Ethics Act, as well as Chapter 6 of the Constitution that binds all of us.
You've said something interesting, that nation first. And I'm just reflecting on the name of your administration, Kenya Kwanza. It actually means the same thing.
It's not by coincidence. It's a policy. It's a nomenclature which speaks of to policy.
You're saying that to support the president to unite the country, I don't know what that means, because it is a presidency.
Exactly that. As I've told you, the president has his deputy, and those are the foremost state officials. The rest of us, ministers, PSAs, and other people, civil servants, our work is to support them to deliver. So what I mean is our work is secondary and supportive, because constitutionally, ministers exercise delegated authority. The authority of the people of Kenya is with the president, and when he was running, he had a deputy president, in that order.
Okay. I hear you, Waziri. Let's take a look at the feedback that has come to us at Citizen TV Kenya. At Sam Gituku, the hashtag to use is Citizen Tonight. You don't say your name. Ask him who gives him orders and whether he sanctioned for shoot to kill order during the protests. At what time are police supposed to shoot to kill? Will he take full responsibility for the security breakdown, and when will he resign? Probably you could respond to that first.
First of all, the National Police Service is independent on operational matters and is only under the instruction of the Inspector General. The work of the minister is to give policy directives and policy guidance.
Okay. All right. We'll take another feedback that has come from Boniface Mwangi. Government spokesperson Isaac Mora said that Russians are funding protests. Is that true? The president claims treason was committed. How come those who allegedly did that are still free? Why disrupt peaceful protests? Reparations for those they killed and maimed? Who are the goons and financiers, and why are they still free? Why are the police still abducting people? When is he resigning? Those are many questions.
Very many questions. Let me answer a few.
Yeah.
Especially, I've seen the resignation thing was even in the other question.
Yeah.
First of all, it's not in my place to talk about foreign countries because we have a foreign affairs ministry. Number two, in terms of shoot to kill orders, I have said operational independence of the police is guaranteed in the Constitution. You may want to read Article 245 of the Constitution with very clear delineation of the roles of the Cabinet Secretary for Interior and the Inspector General of Police, IG on operational matters, and the only directives the Minister for Interior, and is the only one who can give directives outside DPP to the IG.
Right.
The Minister of Interior directs the IG on policy matters. As to when I am resigning, that matter has not crossed my mind because I do not have a reason why I should resign. If for whatever reason I was convinced that I've done anything that warrants my resignation, I would happily do so.
Okay. Of course, you said that the question of Russians does not fall within your mandate, but the government spokesperson is within your office, no?
No, it's in the office of the president.
So
but it's government spokesperson.
Yeah.
And maybe because the government spokesman sometimes gets information from various ministries, maybe I would request that follow-up could be through his office. But from where I sit as the Interior Minister, I am not in a position, even if, let's assume I had any information touching on a foreign country, it is out of protocol for the Interior Minister to be discussing foreign affairs.
But have you heard of any interference from foreign countries?
Not quite. We're just looking for criminals. We have some good information. I have seen the last person there had asked why are people still free. We are not in a hurry because taking people to court is one thing. Sustaining prosecution is a difficult thing. And criminal investigations are complex. They take time. So they could be free for now, but their day is coming and their date with justice for sure will come.
Okay. Some more feedback on what Kenyans are asking. This is Ashihundu. Most of us police officers have overstayed in Northeastern region for over 3 years, yet he promised us to be transferred. What happened? Our able CS, please note that. And Osino Kennedy, you're saying, we see when someone breaks the law, they are arrested, taken to court, and sometimes police ask for more days to retain the suspect. Why is it applied differently when it comes to the police who are suspected of murder? Ask Waziri, the last year's protest, how many police are still in custody? Respond to those two.
The first question on transfers, yes, it is the policy of this administration that officers who have stayed in any station for more than 3 years must proceed on transfer. We started that process about 3 months ago. It is not complete because the numbers are huge, and therefore the logistical and administrative as well as operational implications are that we may take a bit of time, perhaps a whole year, to move the entire 250 officers. Already we have moved a significant number in the region of about 15,000, 16,000, but work is ongoing. We will ensure that everyone who has stayed in one station for more than 3 years will be moved to a new station. Secondly, I have been asked to...
There's the question on how many police officers are still in custody based on...
There are 2-3 cases which are normally, I think, initiated by POA, which I think are pending before court, of police officers. And normally we don't interfere with the work of IPOA because it's an independent agency. We have actually had even dismissals ourselves through the Inspector General of Police when police officers are found to have violated the law through the internal affairs unit of the police. But in terms of the protests, I like calling them demonstrations for constitutional reasons. That is the province of IPOA. I know there are 2 or 3 cases where IPOA have concluded investigations and recommended to the DPP to charge those officers, and we don't interfere with those cases.
Okay, I hear you, because one of the other concerns has been that when it's about civilians, they are arrested or abducted or whatever the case is, but police officers who can actually be seen on footage, they're still walking around and continuing with your work with that.
I gave the reason that it's a forensic process, especially the use of bullets. It's not easy to say, okay, I saw somebody shooting and therefore that must be the bullet that felled that person.
So there's a question that has been coming to us for many years, even before you became the Cabinet Secretary for Interior Affairs, and that is on police graduates that have not been taken to the next level. Some have been constables. They were expecting to be moved to the rank of inspector. That has not happened. The reviews have not been looked into. How do you respond to their concerns, but also the Maraga task force that had quite a bit of reforms proposed?
It is true that matter has been in court for many years, and finally the court made its decision, I think about maybe under a year ago. And at the same time, we were having the Maraga task force ongoing, and they did recommend the same in line with what the court had recommended. So we are now preparing a cabinet memo. I think it's almost ready on the Maraga task force reforms, and we intend to comply not only with the recommendations of the task force, but also the court order. As it is, we have no option anyway. We have to comply with it.
Any chance of, what do you call it? What is the word that you use that you can go back to since that time that their rights may not have been observed?
I didn't understand your question. Are you saying any chance that we can?
You can implement those, the court order. From taking effect from the date that...
From the date of the judgment. Yeah, that is the right thing.
How much would that cost?
We will, sorry again?
How much would that cost?
Whatever it costs. If we find that the budget will not allow, we will just have to negotiate a phased out implementation. We may have to go back to court again and request fresh orders on implementation. But in terms of implementing the court order, we have no option, we have to comply. So we have not gone there yet because we are waiting for this CAB memo, which is going to adopt formally the task force recommendations so that now we can implement them as policy decisions of Kenya Kwanza administration.
Okay, I think what I was looking for is backdating. But there's a question here that you framed suspect to be in 2 groups, but now you're going back to look for the offenses. So you already know who the offenders are, but now you're looking for the offenses. How does that work?
I don't think I understand fully, but the point is, you know, what helps you categorize offenders is the facts. Okay, Mr. So-and-so, who is he? What do they do? What is their profile? And then they have done this offense. That's why I said the one group are political operatives And their work has been to mobilize people, to block highways, to ban infrastructure, etc., to loot. And then there are criminal gangs which have existed. Some of them were resurrected during these demonstrations, especially in Mombasa and Nakuru. So it's the facts and the profiles of the people linked to those facts is what has helped us to categorize the two groups of offenders.
So just in winding up, your main concern is the violence, the criminal activities, or it's also the demonstrations themselves?
Why would I have a problem with demonstrations?
Does online mobilization have an issue here?
No, mobilizing people to demonstrate is lawful.
Okay.
But mobilizing people to loot people's shops or obstruct traffic or to ban the railway is criminal.
All right. Waziri, I have to thank you so much for making time for us, for coming to have this conversation.